Happy Halloween, mortals. Oh, what's that? You want to hunt me down? I mean, if you think you can, keep watching. You might learn something useful. This project took me about 2 months, and I wasn't sure if it was going to get done, but here we are. If you'd like to make one for next Halloween, depending on your motivation level, maybe start in June. First, you need a chest. I found this lovely cedar one on Craigslist for $10. Specifically wanted it because of the built-in shelf. It does need a little facelift. The shelf is a little broken and it needs to be sanded and stained for the desired look. I've woken up a little bit earlier today to try to get some sanding done because I have to do it by hand. I found out last night our electric sander, well, the motor is bad. Unless I buy one. Update, I bought a sander. If you're tempted to click off because this part is boring, maybe you need to accept that projects are at least 50% boring, tedious prep work. But to quell your hunger for instant entertainment, let's talk about the whys of this video. It was winter of 2020, right before my friend and I stumbled into an incredible antique shop, and on the top floor of this magical place lay 2 antique vampire hunting chests for the low price of $18,000 and $11,000. Anyway, the other month, my friend said she went to an antique shop with her boyfriend, and I asked her, "Did you see any vampire hunting chests?" She said no. And then that fun little part of my brain went, let's make one! I've never restained wooden furniture before, but it wasn't too hard. Sand, wipe off the dust, apply the stain. Not sure what I was complaining about here, but I used the color Aged Walnut, very appropriate. And then I applied a sealer/top coat. But now it's time to start making the fun inside pieces, which is a very iterative process based on the inspiration photos I needed. Pointy things, religious-y things, pointy religious-y things, stabby things, choppy things, fiery things, bottled-y things like salt, iron shavings, dead man's blood, garlic, holy water, rose essence, mustard seeds, and Gwyneth Paltrow products. If you want to make a chest this size, you're going to need a plethora of materials. I can't even list them all out. I'll either put it on screen or in the description box. I used a lot of items I already had or found for free. I purchased things from yard sales, thrift shops, and the dollar store. A couple cheap items came from the craft store, and a couple things did come off of Amazon. So if you're resourceful and you have the necessary tools already, or you can borrow them, I think you could make this for $100, maybe less, maybe more. And I already know this is not going to be enough stuff. So now that I've acquired the will to live again, I'm going to do like a little fit test. See how it looks. See what I need to change. Rinse. Recycle. Repeat. No, that was wrong. Wait, what? I decided I wanted bottles on the left, which I'll need a shelf for. That ends up being a cut piece of wood with some boxes underneath. I want weapons on the right, which I'll need some hanging devices for the hatchets and something to hold the stakes with. On the top shelf, I want the knives, smaller religious items, and the smaller bottles. I'll also need some hanging devices for the knives on the lid of the chest. This creates some texture rather than throwing everything in and calling it a day. Now let's make some wooden stakes. I don't actually know what makes a stick good quality for turning into a stake. I should probably Google that. Did I leave my phone upstairs? There's a lot of tutorials that will get you really nice, even wooden stakes, but I don't have access to those tools. So today, we're working harder, not smarter. I've had an idea. It's already broken. I started with the stick to figure out the process, which is take your hatchet, hack it downwards into a pointy shape. Take a smaller knife, make it pointier. Take an even smaller knife and make it even, you already get it. Repeat said process on the chair legs. And if you're wondering why I didn't use my woodsman knife, well, I want to save it for when I actually need it. I got a blister. Why is this bee bothering me? There's nothing for you here. Dude, come on. Now that the wood underneath is exposed, you could leave it, but I decided to add several layers of the wooden stain before sealing it for a more uniform look. You see me doing the entire top section here, but you only need to do just the end. Did you think I was gonna say tip? This stick is kind of flat, which makes the end perfect for the cross stake, which we will get to later. Found some more wood that I liked, and created a large cross stake with the same process. To cover up the messiness, I painted the end with red for vampire blood. My father suggested this. He also suggested that I nail the wood together in the shape of a cross. Later on, I made these mini stakes, but I hadn't even thought of them at this point. Just know they exist, and I used a handsaw to cut out the shape. You could leave the stakes as is, but I wanted to create little grips. For the nicer stakes, I used fake leather cord from Amazon. Process was simple. Tie it at the top, wrap it down the length, and then tie it at the bottom. I used some glue to secure the knots as well. I don't love how this was done. It looks messy. So I made a decision regarding timelines. Maybe not for this project in particular, but I want the things I create to be pieces of art. But I also wanted to get this video out by Halloween, which didn't happen, and I let myself cut corners and didn't fix a lot of messy details. I'm not being a perfectionist here. I'm saying I need to delve more into the technical aspects of artistry, which takes time. I'm not an artist by trade yet, so these timelines are self-imposed, and they do get my projects done, but I'd rather have them done well. In a complete 180, if you want to save lots of money and time, use dollar store, blister, or foam medical tape to imitate leather grips. It's much faster to apply than thin leather cord. And it's the MVP of this project, along with acrylic paint, hot glue, and twine. You want to use a dab of glue. I used E6000, not hot glue, at the start and finish to prevent the tape from coming up. To make it look more like leather, I brushed on several layers of brown acrylic paint. What you see here is not the finished project. I ended up using some gold later on. I went rummaging through my stuff and I found some more items. 3 more bottles, this Avon perfume bottle. Also got these from the dollar store for the top shelf. Some cork to lay on the bottom of the top shelf. Self-explanatory. Don't want to drill into my cedar chest, so what I'm gonna attempt to do is cut this wood up, glue it to the side of the chest, and then put the hardware. I didn't end up using the brackets. I glued the pegs to the side of the chest, but it's really not sturdy. I would recommend maybe just building a shelf or drilling into the chest. I'll get to these Velcro straps for the lid of the chest later, but just know this doesn't work very well. You don't need instructions on cutting fake cork. Just know I spray painted them a bit to make them look dirtier, and then changed my mind and used felt for 2 of the sections later anyway. Found this on the curb, pulled out some of the shelves and painted them. This became my stake holder, and I did paint it darker towards the end. Now there were a lot of items that I needed to stain or paint. The technique that worked really well was using some of the wood stain and then lightly layering on some brown acrylic paint before it dries. So instead of that muddy acrylic paint finish, the wood texture is preserved. And it was faster than waiting for the stain to dry and applying more layers. I used stain on the jar lids as well because they looked too modern. This is a cross I painted as a child. I know, don't quit my day job. I used a darker and lighter brown for some texture. Something I experimented with was mixing in some teal with the brown, and it definitely gave it that decrepit old wood color. I use the same wood stain acrylic paint technique on these wooden mini crosses from Amazon, and I use these in so many places. If you're gonna glue them onto wood, definitely sand it first or it won't stick well. I also dipped these fake dollar store prayer bead things into the wood stain, and then I attached mini crosses to the end. For the mini stakes, like I said, I did not use the hatchet process, but a saw. The wood underneath was exposed, so I painted them with red, like the other one, and I like to apply the paint and then rub it in with my fingers so it blends a little bit better. This is somewhere you can learn from my mistakes. I cut off the end from the piece I shaped earlier and I glued it on. However, I would use fasteners next time, which means drilling holes. I might use some epoxy glue to secure the fasteners, and this way you can screw the stake into the cross, which would be much more secure. I used some twine later on to reinforce it, and because it looked cool, but it was flimsy and it did break twice during filming. The issue here is I'm using a wedge and a vise to apply pressure while the glue dries, but I did this vertically, and it needs to be done horizontally as well, but I didn't want to damage the stake. The third MVP of this video is twine, which I added to so many of these bottles for that, 17th century look. And it's the same process as the cord wrapping. Tie it, wrap it, tie it again, maybe use some glue. It looks messy, it's annoying, but it's fine. I did the same thing for this bottle, but I decided to add some felt, and I hot glued that on. But be aware, hot glue and glass don't really mix, so viewer discretion is advised. Now for the labels, which are all from the dollar store. Step 1. Attach them to your bottles/jar in the desired place. Step 2. Paint them with acrylic paint. And I used my finger to rub off a bit so there's room for the lettering later on. But I can't label anything yet because I don't know what's going where at this point. I also used paint to dirty up these 3 jars because again, they looked a little bit too new. Now for all the fills. First up is Dead Man's Blood, which is water and red food coloring, but I added a bit of black acrylic paint and it made it look much better. Like this one I accidentally sealed without it and this one has it. And then I used hot glue to seal the cork, which, again. Dairy Queen Blizzard Test. Okay, so update. Here's the Dead Man's Blood. I'm gonna leave it like this for a while and see if any of them leak. I've also decided to do half mustard seed, half salt, half mustard seed. Because I like to make my life more complicated than it has to be. Makeshift funnel for filling these mini bottles up, but I still made a mess. I used some polyfill as fake salt because I already used a ton in the larger jars. I painted the salt tops red, the mustard seed tops black, and I did go back and change the lettering on the silver screw cap bottles later on. Again, I painted them to look a little bit more rusty and old. For the rose essence, I cut up some dollar store flowers. They didn't even have roses, but anything red will do. Shoved them in the bottle and then filled that with water. As for the salt, garlic, and matches, well, I used salt, garlic, and matches. For iron shavings, I didn't really care. I half filled up one of the bottles with some twiggy dirt and that looked okay. And now for my least favorite part, labeling the labels. This is what I've got to work with. Please don't let me mess these up. My best idea was a bronze-colored metallic marker pen. And then I hoped and prayed, pun intended, that the lettering looked decent. I'm not going to be too hard on myself here. This is one aspect of the project that I'm willing to let go. So now we have Dead Man's Blood, and then these are supposed to be iron shavings. But I just did their symbol on the periodic table because it was shorter and also because it's kind of, you know, ironic. And for these labels, I used a red marker. They look decent. Like I said before, I redid the small bottles with the marker pen. What? How did you get in here? Now it's time to attach knives to the lid of the chest. The strap idea is not terrible, but Velcro isn't strong enough to hold up the items. I ended up hot gluing the straps to the sticky back Velcro. If anything, use something as a base to stick to the chest, and you still want something adjustable like a strap or a leather cord on top. I use blister tape over the straps to hide them, but this is messy. Use a more durable material. I painted the tape in several layers of brown and darker brown. You just want to do some basic shading, and I added a bit of red brown as well, which I think gave it a richer aged leather look. Another dig yielded a mirror, this, binoculars, some more bottles. I made some wooden crosses. I go on to say I'm almost done, but I couldn't arrange everything in a pleasing way because I've decided that the shelf is literally the problem. I need a longer one to go all the way. So I just bought some board and I'm gonna cut it now. Executive decision to put a shelf back here for some dimension since I've lowered this shelf, and I'm gonna cover it with this. The last item I made was this vampire skull, which my friend suggested adding. Can I make something like this with something like this? For the base layer, I started with white and tan and then made some darker iterations of that for some definition. For the hollow parts, I layered on brown and then black. There's a very slight gradient around the eye sockets. It's hard to see, but I do like the way it looks. I wasn't sure how I was gonna do these fake teeth. This is it. This is the idea. Bio paint glue, let's go. It's like watching paint dry. I'm quite pleased with this. Actually, I'm suspicious because nothing ever goes according to plan. I don't know how this worked. Finally, the finishing touches. I think I'm gonna put some gold on some stuff, just little accents. I used a bit of glue under that felt to pinch it like fabric. I glued a mini cross onto the top of this Bible and then painted the edge with gold. I added gold to basically all the handles onto this mini cross, which I glued to the top of the chest. on dollar store candles, and on the end of the chair leg stakes. Okay, last thing I have to do, I've mixed some brown and orange because I'm feeling a little feral, I guess. And I'm gonna dirty up the bottom of this just a little bit. I need some color in it. Let's talk about what I learned. Actually, let's not. Just enjoy this montage of everything that I made. If you want to see what I make next, like and subscribe.